Well, I'm excited to be here. Welcome to the WFX webinar on social media on purpose, creating content that creates engagement. My name is Jeff Abramovitz. I'm with 2 Degrees Media, and I'm really excited to be with you today to understand better how you can use content in an effective way to reach those that you're trying to reach. And in the case of many of you here as part of the WFX, we're talking about those in your church and members that you're trying to reach outside of your church. Just some pictures of me in my family. And talk about content. To some degree, content is really what makes up your organization. And for me, this is a lot of my content. That's in the middle with his wife of almost 2 years. That's my daughter on the right. She's a senior at University of Arkansas, studying in France for the semester. That daughter, Erin, she's in Dallas down below, and that's Mike and I doing something we hardly ever do, and four-wheel. So if I'm scared of that picture, actually I got a nice smile, but if it was really exhilarating for me because I'm not a four-wheel kind of guy. I learned to drive a stick shift at the age of 16. My mom got a car called Dodge Omni, and I know that's going to date me, and so for all of you who care, I'm going to go and try to find out. If you don't, I've never had the Dodge Omni because they don't make it anymore. It was a tin can of a car, and my mom got it, and it was one of those. It was a stick shift with a high stick door, and so I had to learn how to drive it. I grew up in Minnesota, and of course, you mostly, if you're not that area, you certainly know of the winters and the harshness of the winters. In fact, they just got 7 inches of snow last night in Arkansas, so I don't miss that at all. But I have to drive in that, and when you're 16, learning how to drive a car for the first time, you're getting all of this information into your head. It's overload at the time. You know that when you drive a stick, because you add another component to it. So when you approach stop sign, hit the clutch, hit the brake, change the gear. Don't ever change the gear when the clutch is in. If you're downhill, you want to downshift, so you're not putting in the brake all the time, and all of these things that you learn. And for you kid at 16 who's just learning to drive, that's a lot of information. And about that as I thought about the topic that we want to address today, and that's the area of content within social media. And you get a lot of information. And it doesn't feel overwhelmed when it comes to the area of content, really paying attention to social media. Because you've made a conscious effort to say, I'm not going to be overwhelmed by it, and so you just shut it off altogether. But those of us who are engaged in it, and if you're watching this seminar, it's probably because you care about this subject. You can easily feel overwhelmed. There's so much information out there. So how can you create content in the midst of more and more content being created than has ever been created in the history of mankind? How do you get more stuff seen? And that's what we want to talk about today. I'm not going to give you any magic bullets. There is no pixie dust that you can just simply spread over everyone. And that if I just do these 3 things, so many blogs and so many websites will tell you the 5 keys to getting great to reaching your audience, the 3 things to do, the 18 things you need to do to reach this. I want to give you a better framework than that. In fact, one of the guys that I like reading the most when it comes to social media is a guy named Brian Solis. Brian is kind of the thought leader when it comes to content, social media, interaction, because he really treats it like there's a discipline. And one of the things that I like, especially when it comes to what's called the Christian circle, the spiritual realm of this whole area, because sometimes people don't see the connection between social media and religious areas or the church or ministry. What I like to do is really say, the things that make you effective in life, that make you effective in leadership, really the things that work in social media. Why? Because really it's about relating. It's just relating in different ways. In fact, I like this quote by Alwyn Cosgrove, that methods are many and principles few. Methods often change, but principles never do. And that's really what we're talking about. The principles that make you a good friend, the principles that make you a good connector in real life, on face-to-face conversations, are the same things that work in the social media world. And so keep them work in mind as we go forward. You get lost in the dust. And there is a lot of dust, a lot of noise when it comes to social media, content marketing. Brian Solis, who I referred to earlier, really has taken it to another level. And I think this is us to keep in mind as well, that content really is no longer king. You've probably heard that added so times. Content is king, content is king. Brian put forth that context is king. And he's, in the book, as we learned during the rise of social and mobile networking, use overfriended. We also knew that we welcomed the never-ending lines of friends and the content shared. We subject ourselves to information overload even when it deflated the fun and diluted the enlightenment of our social experience. The consumer, and I want you to remember that term, the connected consumer, because everyone that you are trying to reach is now connected, and they are driving much more of the content that's coming out ever before. Because I have probably experienced it in some way, shape, or form. Friends on Facebook or Twitter or in LinkedIn or Google Plus who's recommended a movie or recommended a restaurant to go to. More and more people, especially the millennials, those about 17 to 32 years old, the first place they go is online to see if any of their friends have gone to the restaurant they're thinking of going to. They do that almost over Google now. See, we live in this world where the consumers are really driving the information, and so we need to remember that we're working with connected consumers, and that's this is such a critical aspect of learning how to church, how to ministry in the 20th century in the midst of all the noise that social media and content marketing represent. But I want you to come out with, I want you to at least be able to take one creative new thought and introduce from existing content. I don't even think it's about creating new content, and I'll show you why in just a second. But I want to be able to use it in a fresh way. I want to stimulate your minds a little bit and start thinking about new things. So just like me when I was 6, learning how to drive that old monkey that was new, but it was a tin can Omni, through the snow and ice of Minnesota in the wintertime. It was the fact that I had the information. I had to understand how to use the information in context. And so I need to think about that. And then as you think about all things that you produce in an organization, the music, the sermons, the classes, the actions and youth, and the various age groups that you're trying to represent, you have more content than you can ever imagine that you can put out on social media. The issue is how do you position it, which channels do you use, and who's going to monitor what's out there to see how it's being interacted. But it's much more about what your consumer wants to see, the connected consumer, than it is about what you want to put out. A book called Content Rules that came out a few years ago, and it was one of the best, most practical books I'd ever read as I was beginning to learn about social media and really get involved in this area of marketing. And this book, Dan Handley and I can't remember the other guy, but it was really a very practical way to look at how I produce content that matters. Now, this was put out in about 2009, 2010. My dog just turned 15 and isn't 105 in dog years. Well, it's even more exaggerated when you talk about social media. Every 6 months, it's like another 5 to 10 years in technological growth. I mean, it just changes all the time. And that can be overwhelming. But I think if you keep these principles down that I'm going to tell you about today and think about, it will help to keep you a little bit sane. So, well, one morning, what did you do? Well, I had some time. I actually spent some time reading the Bible. I had some time to journal. I had breakfast. Let's see, what else did I do? I actually answered some emails. I responded to some emails. I went on Facebook because I have clients where I'm producing some content for them on their Facebook pages. I've only maybe 4 or 5 hours, and if I were to list all the things that I've done, I have created a lot of content today. And always what we think it is. It is always a written article or a blog post or a video. Certainly those are elements of it, but I want you to think broader. I want you to think that really are content producing people. They do. There are moments and we get them ahead, we think about things, we act out things in real life, and all those things, all the things that we are part of, really make up content. Now, that confuses you more than helps you, because that opens up the world to a whole different level of possibilities. You would have rather had me say, Jeff, it's or these three things, that's content. And then I just have to focus on those. What I'm saying is you can find content all over. You just have to reach out and pick it up. It's there for you. And in many cases, it already exists. It's when we talk specifically, say, about your church, it's sermons that are being used. It's video. It's iPhone clips from a retreat from your youth events. It's a women's conference. It's the things that people are putting out from the women's conference and all social networks. It's blogs. It's meetings you have in your organization that talk about the direction of your church. Those interesting pieces. Now, sometimes you can't share all those, but you can do enough to help create some intrigue in your church itself. Content comes from so many places. If you think creatively, it's not difficult to figure out where content is. Let me just kind of walk through this example. In church, what's the most important piece of content we have? Well, it's the whole Bible. It's the Word of God. All right. And that is what drives everything. And the reason I share this is because I think sometimes we get lost in marketing ease, that those who are in certain places are a little harder to convince when it comes to social media are those that are saying that social church, need cross paths. And what I will do is help you see that, no, you should cross paths. And what got even started in social media was because about 6 years ago, I think it was, mine had a daughter who was 17 years old. She had been at our house the previous summer with my kids. Got to know her pretty well. She was kind of I won't say trouble, but she had some challenges. She's Christian, but she had some areas of life that she was struggling with. But I knew she was a believer in Christ. And so this thing called Twitter was just kind of coming out. It was probably 2008 area time frame, I guess. And so I thought I would just, after the funeral, I tweeted a message that said, a 17-year-old friend of mine, we just said goodbye to her, but I know that she is now in a better place. That was the intent of my tweet. Back a direct message, which is like in Twitter, it's like email. So it was directly just to me, not to the public, and it was from a young man out of New York University. And the comment he had was, well, I tried religion once, and it did was create anxiety. And wow, it was just put out something. I didn't know if anyone was going to ever see it. And it actually touched a young man enough that he reached out to me and said, yeah, I've tried this religion stuff, but it's not working for me. And that began a long, about 4-month conversation that we had back and forth on Twitter that migrated over to email. And it was one of the first impressions I had as to the power of social media, because if you think in terms of relationships, it has significant value. It's not just about putting stories out there about my new puppy or a cat that just threw up on the carpet or any of that stuff. It was real because it touched another human being. Well, we in the Christian church, that this book has the foundational answers of life, and so that'd be a great piece of content for social channels. And the pastors to give us, we need him to study the Word of God, to go and glean truths outward and share it with us. And that's what happened in church all across the country, every Sunday morning and Saturday night and sometimes Wednesday night, and more increasingly online, by the way. But our pastors to teach the Word. So spend time in the Word and teach. And then we're going to go and want you to impart to the congregation what you learned in the Bible, what you've learned in the Word. Now, that's not the only time that, as followers of Christ, we want to spend time in the Word, but he's actually translating from, he's teaching from the Word, giving it to us, and then he wants us, and so does God, want us to interact back and forth with the Bible, for us to take it in, to read it. And so we're talking about social media. We're not tossing out the Bible. We're not saying this is anti-biblical. We're saying, No, as members of the church, we've got the best content ever. Why learn how to take parts of it and put in new wineskin? You know, it said, you don't put wine in old wineskin. And for many, many people who have never heard the truths of the Scripture, who don't understand it, this social media is like the new wineskin. You're going to have to contextualize it, put it into the context that people are now hearing in. And we're not replacing the pastor. We're not saying he's no longer necessary. We need to do things through social media channels. And we're asking the pastor to do more, and him not only do you have to prepare a sermon, but I want you to tweet and to do book and to blog and to do video. All right, that's what this is all about. What it is learning how to use these channels to say the Word of God has come out of our pastor, but the ways that we can fit this through. We have the channels that have been growing, and I'll show you some numbers in just a bit, but the number of the pieces of content that are coming through social media is astronomical. It's growing every day, and here's the real news. I don't say spoiler alert. It's not going to change. This is not going to go backwards. We are not going to see less and less. We may see more discerning use of social media, and I think we're starting to see that a little bit. People are being overburdened with content, which is even more critical that you understand who you're speaking to and saying to them. But as we, our pastors and our teachers, and this is just an isolated concept, but if you can get this, then you can start to figure out other ways to use other things going on in the church, not just your pastor's teaching, but others are going on in the church. Oh, and your organizations or your ministries or whoever else you are watching this webinar applies to industries, to businesses, to nonprofits. It's all the same thing. The issue, we're not asking him to change the message. We're saying we got new ways to share that message. And there are many ways that our congregation, those who are partaking of the message, can now disseminate that and share it, just like I did with that Twitter message where the young man heard it and we started a conversation. Because to reach more people, right? If you were, I want to get more customers and keep the customer happy. So what do I need to do that? We're talking about church or issues of the church. We're talking about, now we want to get the message out to the people in our church, but we want to reach more people. And I really contend that, listen, this might be new to a lot of people. Church is the ultimate model of how social media works. And what I mean by that? Well, God gave Moses the 10 Commandments. And how did he do it? Well, I guess you could say he used social media. He put 10 Commandments on stones that he told Moses to take down off the mountain to share with the people of Israel. And they do. As time on and Jesus, now comes into the picture in the New Testament, God gives us Jesus because of world people. His social world in these 12 kind of goofballs, these disciples, so to speak, and he builds into them and gives life. And so he's sharing, just like we share information. They're king. Now it's face, but I've seen so many articles out there. What would Jesus Twitter? And if Jesus had a Facebook, what would it look like? And all that kind of stuff. But I just heard that the Bible, a television program that showed up on the History Channel, had 50 million viewers last night. So if we think that people are still interested in this word, are mistaken. And we have an opportunity using this content to a lot of people. So it's really cool stuff. So did Jesus leave with the disciples? He said, I want you to take what I've taught you. I want you to go into Jerusalem and to Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the world. I want you to take this message. That media. That's me taking the content of my life. That's the things that I think somebody might be interested in. It might be only 4 or 5 things. I like to read. I like to run. I enjoy sports. I love college basketball, March Madness. I'm interested in faith issues and apologetics, and I love my family, and I also write a dad blog. Okay, there's 6 or 7 things, but that's really the core of who I am, and so almost all of my content is going to come out of one of those. I don't need an expert on everything. And most of the things that I produce on when it comes to content come out of who I am. And if you're an employee of an organization or a church, it's going to be true. Yeah, it's got to be your voice, and that's what's going to make it really effective. Forward. Well, first of all, understanding that social media is not a substitute for content. Content is the material for social media. And then adding more, that it's about the context of your content that's really going to matter. Media. Well, Joe was going to talk about some statistics here. Just a second, Mark Rubio, water. Some statistics. I think we get overwhelmed with statistics, and at some level, I don't know that any of us can understand what all this means. I mean, 2 trillion tweets a day, whatever it is, 100,000 tweets are sent every minute of the day. 100,000 tweets are sent every minute of the day. Now, half of those are my daughter, but to grasp that, so in an hour, okay, let's multiply that. See, there's 6 million tweets an hour, or 144 million tweets a day. I can grasp that. I have a tough time with it. But nothing else, it means to kind of or talk to you understand the overwhelming nature, but why you need to get in the game. Because I can guarantee you that everyone who sits in your church, everyone who you talk to at youth group, everyone that you play music and worship to, is in some way, shape, or form. And I can guarantee it. So these statistics kind of help us put things in perspective. 3,600 instant photos are shared every minute. That's the content. Statistics, just so you can kind of get a sense of, all right, if I'm going to link that I can create, and I want to put it in the context, I better understand where my audience is. And Facebook is the big gorilla in this game. And I think this is an amazing number right here. 6.75 hours spent monthly individual spent on Facebook. But about 20 minutes a day. And my guess is that's skewed because I know a lot of people who I would raise that average really high. But here's one that's pretty interesting. Just keep this in the back of your mind. Google Plus does registered users, but the active users, these are people going onto the platform and actually using it. 70 million versus Twitter, 6.9 million. So there's much more engagement happening on Google Plus. The other benefit about Google Plus, and I'm going to talk about each of these or social media channels in detail down the road in a few minutes, but just want to give you an overview of how they relate to each other. And I think this one's interesting, and it makes sense, doesn't it? Pinterest is a much higher female versus male user base. Google Plus is much higher male. LinkedIn is actually more female. That surprised me because I hear how LinkedIn is all about business, but LinkedIn has some really it's growing in terms of engagement, and you can see it's actually as a percentage as engaging as Google is for the number of registered users. So I think it's interesting statistics. I really like this chart. It was from Pew Research Center. It really talks about, this kind of gets us where we're at. When we start a Facebook post, it's just we're reaching. But what Facebook is saying is that in this case, the percentage of internet users who use Facebook, 67, and mainly women, adults ages 18 to 29. It's actually appealing to. Okay, this isn't everyone, but this is just give you an idea of who the dominant users of this particular channel are. Pinterest, adults under 50, and those with some college education. Instagram, adults ages 18 to 29, African Americans. Now, this is meant to segment people. It's just saying these are ones doing a statistical study of the social media channels that they're using. So you should keep this in mind when you're thinking about using various channels. Because actually, when you think about going outside of your current base. Because if you're a church, most of the people that are liking your church on Facebook, for instance, are your members. Now that's good because that allows you to communicate with them. But at some level, as an organization, you're going to say, I want to reach out to more. How do I do that? And who you're going to reach is effective. A friend of mine named Bob Hutchins, who is, works for a social media company called Plant, put out a survey, and the thing actually got viral pretty quickly. He didn't realize what he's doing. He did a survey of over 250 churches and put out this survey, and got interesting comments back. And immediately Mashable picked it up. Mashable is one of the one of the more recognized curators of social media and technology information out there. So just about anything that they pick up gets at least retweeted 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 times. So that was a big deal for him to have a survey picked up by Mashable. And I pull a couple of slides off from the study. You can go to buzzplant.com to find out more. This was how often do churches use social media. Okay, well, you can see that the church kind of reflects similar to we saw in other statistics. They use Facebook. About 45% use Facebook every day. The churches do. Percent use them once a week, but most use them seldom, and actually, a pretty high percentage that never use Facebook. So your church falls in that, but look at the rest of them. Now, MySpace is a little outdated. They're trying to come back, and it's going to be a long path for them. But here's what you did. Somebody said, and this is a strategy. I grew up, and there was a guy. Now, I don't know if he's the one that said it, but I remember him saying it. I don't know if he originated it. But there was Rod Carew, who's one of the best hitters I ever saw. I was a Minnesota Twins fan, and Rod just had a unique batting style. I remember mimicking it as a kid, and I would get in the box and try to hit like Rod Carew did. Of course, obviously I couldn't. That's why I'm doing this and not playing baseball. But Rod, they asked him, how are you so successful? And he said, I hit them where they ain't. And I think this chart shows me some opportunities for organizations. Just there isn't anyone there doesn't mean it's not where you shouldn't be. This is that these are probably changing, just like I talked about dog years related to social media technology change. This is going to be constantly in flux, but at this point in time, this is what it was. You see that Pinterest has a huge opportunity for those, for women's groups, to reach women's groups. If that's the predominant group that uses Pinterest, producing content within Pinterest and building your platform there is probably not a bad idea. So look at this and you figure out that where you've got some gaps and some things that you can use in your organization. Communication and social media. Where churches state is their most effective method of outreach. Social media, 46%. I thought it was actually relatively high. But this number, 24.7% on doors, really is me. Now, I hope we never stop trying to reach people face to face. That if we just send out a Facebook message, the message of the gospel is going to get caught. Right. And it gives us a reach that we don't have today, but it's not a substitute for people meeting people. And I don't think it is. I think sometimes we create fears simply to create more content that we can talk about. We're connected, we are verbal, we are auditory, we are relational beings. So is another way for us to relate, and we can't finish it. When many people are meeting their spouse on social networks, we understand it has a place. But replace the opportunity for us to meet people face to face. But it still surprises me that this many people are still knocking on doors, and this number is as high as it is, it's still not even 50%. So that's an opportunity, and I think that number is going to change drastically over the next year or two. So, well, it'll end more. All right, it's similar to what I was just telling you. If you just stop and think a little bit about what you've done today, the thing that involved with it, you have intent without even knowing it. The iPhone has obviously transformed the way that we communicate, because iPod, it's a phone, and it's a computer all in one. Cameras, images are the most shared item on the internet, bar nothing. Video is growing. Podcasting is making a huge renaissance. And so I'm actually starting my own dad podcast coming up shortly. And I'll be doing my own social media podcast. Music is always great content. Archery, paint, text, looks just like we live each and every day. And what I'm trying to do is, again, remove the maybe fear of, I got to create more content. I don't have time to create content. I'm saying I believe most of you already have content. The issue is managing the content with the right channel and knowing what you want to do. The key is engagement, and I think this still, I found this chart a couple years ago. I think it's still relevant today. The 5 keys to using content to your advantage: creation, consumption, curation, collection, and conversation. You read it there. I'm not going to read it, but yeah, there's going to be some opportunity to create original content. And create stands above noise, but it represents who you are, both as an individual and as an organization. That's content that I think most people miss out on. Producing information, but the information being produced that you should be partaking of. So one of the I do is I talk to other churches and ministries is ask them, how much time are you actually online, not your own benefit, but finding out what others in your congregation, what others in your ministry, what others in your community are doing that you can now add your content to. Content form of a comment, a reply, an I'll pray for you, anything I can do to help you. When content becomes actionable, it becomes meaningful. And so it's really important that you spend as much time listening on the social channels as you do producing content for it. Curation is the fact. It's another word saying why create the wheel. There's a lot of stuff out there that's really that you like. Why not it? Maybe you attribute it to the right individual and then put it for your audience. Social media is providing the greatest opportunity that we've seen in our lifetime to be able to produce information to audiences. Have to do. We can just be a conduit of information to them and still be valuable. Right? They always say 2 heads are better than 1. Scripturally, it says, where there are more gathered, we know this is in that that strands of rope are better than 1. It's better to friend if you fall down there. There's somebody there to pick you up. It's really collaboration is key. Do it all yourself isn't going to work. And sometimes I think when it comes to media, especially smaller organizations, they'll be one of the biggest challenges. I'm a person that's been tasked with social media in my organization. How am I supposed to do it all? And I'm going to say, and I'd be your biggest advocate to say you're not supposed to do it all. Organizations that are really success in social media, it's a habit throughout the entire organization, and that'll be the biggest thing. If you're tasked with social media in your church or your ministry, the put on your plate is to do some training for the rest of your organization. How to get information, how to get them out there, because you need eyes. Collaboration is key, and then conversation and appropriate conversations to build engagement and trust through content. So the more you're with others, the more that you're conversing and using it as a conversation tool. If you watch other social media seminars, this almost always invariably gets brought up, and that's, well, I wouldn't go to a cocktail party and just talk about you. You just say, look at me, look at what I'm doing. If any one of you have ever gone to a high school reunion, that's kind of what it feels like sometimes. You have a question, so what have you been doing since graduation? And certain people would just, they'll kind of a life lesson. They'll chronicle everything that they've done since they graduated, and they leave. They never ask you, so what have you been doing? Now, how likely are you to go ask that person again later in the evening another question? Probably not likely. They're interested in you. And that is not conversation. That is not social media, to be honest with you. Talking about some of these channels as we start to move into the actual vehicle to carry your content. A lot of these out there now, Social Media Explained, and this is one of the tamer ones that I could share in this setting. It gives you an idea of how much of these is used. Some of them are pretty funny. Coffee, that's what you share on Facebook. I'm drinking coffee. Twitter with a hashtag around coffee. LinkedIn, good at drinking coffee. These are really the stereotypes of each of these channels, but I think they give you an idea of how each of them are used. So we've talked about content, and content in context is pretty important. You've got content laying all around, and it's in video, and you can create new things, or you can take old piece of content and make new pieces of content out of it. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. But what I'm really talking about is the pastor has written a book, and it's a good book, but it was written 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. But it's probably outdated. Why do you think about taking some of those and putting them into maybe a daily devotional, about making it a weekly podcast where somebody in church just says, hey, every week we're going to take pieces of this book, and it's a 15-minute. John Piper is doing amazing things with social media. Lessons, the information he puts out. If you look at him on Twitter, I don't know how many. He's got over 1 million, 1.3 million, followers or something like that. He doesn't follow anyone. So John Piper is one of the few guys that you'd say, all right, John, social media doesn't really apply to you because he's getting stuff out there. And I said he's not at all. But he video along with his devotions. I subscribe to YouVersion, and that's kind of a devotional time for me. John putting out great material. I'm guessing he's getting most of it from sermons he's done, books that he's written. He's not creating new content. He's just getting it a different way. That's what we've kind of understood about content. And now I'm going to move into, all right, so when I produce this content or I share it in context to the audience, how do I get it out there? Strategy, I just had a conversation with Grogan a few days ago. He was part of a private chat session, and I asked him a couple of questions. I said, Chris, do you still subscribe even to this method of vision? Hub posts and portals. Absolutely. He said even many things are changing in social media. The one thing that doesn't change is that you want people to find a place to settle. You want them to a certain place. And that's still, for most organizations, and I don't think it's changing, the hub is really your website. It's where people are going to find out about you. It's where they're going to, if they come to town and they say, where do I want to go to church, or what good restaurant to eat at, or being high on Google in terms of search is still critical. And people are going to look, and they're going to go to your website. So if your website is funky, it doesn't have if it's old and antiquated, if the event's on there from 2004, it's not likely you're going to get that person to really dig a whole lot further into finding out about your church. They're not going to be interested in that because being interested enough to keep it in contemporary. I'm already thinking about what would church be like there. That happens a lot. And in fact, I was on Google Plus about 4 or 5 months ago, for last year, and I just put out in Google Plus a comment. He was in Little Rock. He was in Little Rock, and he wanted to know what churches people were going to. And so a few people kind of responded back and forth and said, we're going to this church. And I said, we'll go to this church. And the next response was, well, what are the men's ministries like in those churches? And, well, to be honest, our church has we have events on an annual basis for a few months at the beginning of the year, a cohesive, coordinated men's ministry, so to speak, yet. I think that's where they're going to go. Now, I haven't followed up with this guy, but he got a lot of information, and I'm assuming that he decided which church he was going to go to based on what he got as information. But I sent him links to the website, and I said, here's probably the best place for you to go get information about them. And so I sent them to our church's website. If that doesn't represent who you are, he wouldn't go. Even if he did get a recommendation from me, that just helped him get in the door. But he got in the door if you didn't like what you saw immediately, they'll turn around and leave. So you need to think in terms of where you want people to go to your hub. And for most of us, it's still going to be your website. Outposts. Outposts are those things, if you think materially, what are the outposts? Think of the wall of Jerusalem, for instance. The outposts are the corners, the gates. They're where people were looking and saying, hey, there are people coming on the gate. This person's good. This one's not so good. That it gave you a view into the outside world, outside of your little area. And communication would go both ways. People would shout, to the outposts, you get information back, and they would shout it back to the center. And that is, outposts can be things like your email, your Google Plus, your Facebook, your Twitter, and your LinkedIn. These are all things where you've got a profile set up and are ready to distribute information to those that you have become friends with, and use them eventually, hopefully, back to your organization. And you'll get information from your organization and put it out through these outposts. And then, so those things that are out there that you get a little window into, might be things like Reddit or Mix or Dig or Delicious, all these other little areas out there, a lot of these niche networks, I think that's where a lot of these things are going. When the noise gets so high that it's hard to really listen and find that you want. What's happening, a lot of forums are growing again. Groups actually came out with something called Google Community. I think that's brilliant. It's got a real opportunity for it to get people who have a like interest, affinity groups, to set up for that perfectly. So that point is it allows you to have this opportunity to kind of congregate in other ways, and you feed information from the organization, from the posts, through portals, and let people know you're there. They're kind of like a flare. I would envision it. From John Bowles in a book called Follow Me. He says, "For that, I don't care if another church uses social networking in corporate worship or not. I love it. I use it, but I don't have Twitter. I don't have a Twitter mission. It's been about a social networking agenda for West Winds. It's about participation, new ways to connect with one another, reflection, action, and conversation. Regardless of social networking during the weekend, it is and always has been about creating a moment where we can all respond to, or we can all respond to and move forward toward God in fresh ways." That says it all as far as I'm concerned. So we're done. No, I'm just kidding. But that is, he says it's, and really that's what it's about. So if it's about wanting to get on a channel, read how you want to do that. Well, channels. A blog is absolutely fundamental nowadays to have a blog. Why do I say that? Well, and Google has changed how they are analyzing your website for search. They've, through the Panda and the Penguin era, they're changing. You can no longer just sit and stuff your website with keywords. They have to be relevant. And the best way to get fresh content on an ongoing basis is to produce content that continually gets searched, and content that people are reading and linking to, like members of your church and other things. So put a relevant blog on a regular basis. It doesn't have 5 times a week. Michael Hyde, who's one of the social media champions, one out there that, from a platform standpoint, has really made a name for himself in the social media world, from writing every day to writing about 2 or 3 times a day, because he found he was actually overloading those who he was reaching every day. But I think it's critical to do that. So let's look at success factors. Everything is dying. It's not true. Are there blogs? Yes. Are there blogs? Oh, there'll always be a place for them. And platform. When it comes to blogging, you want to think about the platform that you're using. Wes is probably it's used by New York Times and CNN and a lot of other major organizations. You can use other ones, but think about what you're going to do. But these questions: frequency, your niche, voice, shareability. These are all key factors of having a successful blog. And going to be the essence of your blog? Is it just going to be a reposting of sermons? Well, you do that, but I'm missing the opportunity to actually take a different angle. And maybe it's a social services one. It might be ministry opportunities in your neighborhood or in your community. It might be mission organizations within your church that are doing things all around the world. And so you created a platform, so I have to go to 15 different websites and blogs and read about them. I can go to one blog at a church and find out what's going on with the people that I really am ministering with. So when you do it, consider using a blog. And on a scale of 1 to 10, I think a blog is a 9.5. The issue you're going to face is time. And who's going to do it? All right. And I think is probably critical in that most people kind of think, well, is email dying? You know, I think that. I had a group of 7th grade you guys that I started working with because I wanted to kind of walk through the church through 12th, up through 12th grade, prepare them for college. Hopefully they own their faith. And so we spent a lot of time together for 5 years. Email to these guys, they would never get my message. They never used email. But they Facebook, and they did use text messaging. So that's how I communicate with them about the next, if we were going to meet, week, where we were going to meet, all that kind of stuff. But business and churches still use email. And at some point, my 7th grade young man is going to go work for a company that's going to use email. So he's going to have to learn how to use it. It's not. And in fact, it's probably the key to getting and growing your base of people that you can contact. Because email is opt-in. You know, some follow me on Facebook, and how it sets up. I may know them, I may not. You know, for the most part, they have to be my friends. But one thing out there, I don't know who sees it. And kind of the same with email. I don't know who sees it, but I know somebody opted in and they cared about what I had to say. And so your core fans. Okay, forget about email. And that's to tie newsletters to your blog posts. That's key. And then to build your list through your social channels. And I think this is a 9. Okay. This is really pretty critical. Facebook as a church and doing good things with it, I think missing a huge opportunity. On Facebook to be a really good place of engagement, even though there's 1 billion people on it. When I have 2 clients that I produce their Facebook content for, when I put out really good stuff, I mean, I kind of put out many blog posts. So I'm kind of bucking the system a little bit because people are used to use brief comments and statuses. I do put out a lot of images out there. They work really well. In fact, if you need to find good images that get tagged to your message. Using Facebook with images is critical for sharing. Use quotes from your pastor, quotes from other believers that have a message that's consistent with your church. Those get shared. Why do you get shared? Because there's this thing called newsfeed out there. And if any of you have been on Facebook, you see that news feed. It's kind of like that Twitter, feed. It's all the stream of stuff that's going on and on. It's all your friends. And Facebook uses a thing called EdgeRank, where they say basically, where they basically take the frequency of the post versus the share ability of the post, how many people have seen it and shared it and commented and liked on it. And they use a couple of other factors, and that is what determines whether it goes up on the newsfeed or not. The more an item gets shared, the more it gets commented on, the more it show up on a newsfeed for other people to see it. So if you have a Facebook page and you put something out there once a week, I can guarantee you're seeing it. And there's something called talking about this. That's the measure that Facebook uses. It's a reflection of how many stories have been created out of your post, how many times it has been commented on and shared, and then how many times it has been shared from there. And the times it gets shared, and the more visibility it gets, the more talking about this rises. And so it gives you a chance to evaluate, is your work effective? I use a relative framework of 20%. So if 1,000 friends or 1,000 likes on my Facebook page, this is my business page, not my personal page, my minister church page. But if I have 1,000 likes to have about 200 people talking about it at any time. Then I know it's constantly showing up on the news feeds of the people on my list, and I gauge them. But never yet was it Pareto's principle, the 80 people, 80% of the people, any group that are going to be doing about 80% of the sharing of your content, they're your fans. Make sure you reach out to them. You know, I'll share one of the things that's been most effective for me with my clients when I've shared content is I'll recognize my fans. So I'll say on their page, the new likes on my client's page. I'll list their names out. It reminds me of remember you went to summer camp and took video and photos all week while you were at camp, and then the last day they showed that that montage of music and you're watching. Who are you looking for in that video? You're looking at you. That's me. So as much as say, well, it's not really about us and all that. The reality when it comes to social media and in terms of attracting people, make it about them. And if I had said this, I should have said it, and I couldn't say it enough if I had said it. And that's it is about consumer connectedness. I did say that. This is more about think of what is it that the people who are fans, your likes, your follows, your commenters, what do they want? Not what you want to tell them. Okay, they didn't get that in a class. Media is much more about sharing personal information, make it human, though it might be an organization. It's really about what they want to hear. And so sharing content that really reflects that is going to get you a long way. So this is a content calendar that I created. This will help you at least kind of figure out how can I organize my information. On the one side, these were ways that I segmented my content. So this is one of my clients, and so I'm sharing that with you. But here's hood quotes. These are resources, an image plus a question, a blog post, and so the X's were my plan. And I tried to plan it out so that I could get different types of content posted different days, spread throughout a period of time. At the top, you'll see on each of those weeks, I tried to figure out a theme, some themes that I could use to really help streamline my content. So, every piece of content I had that week was about that, but I wanted to make sure that I had a theme that I could kind of play to. And you can do that as well. In fact, I would suggest it. So here, that was just it was a very helpful piece of information for me to be able to plan out my content better. Now, Twitter, an interesting piece of social channel. Is the people are using it much differently than people my age. In say the baby boomers and the Gen Zers even, Twitter is about sharing content. So you find a great content of an article out there or a piece of information or a score of a game and you share that. Who's a junior at the University of Arkansas. I think I meant to say senior. She's junior at the University of Arkansas. She uses it kind of like you text messaging, but thoughts, and then other people comment, and so they communicate. And she's got her own little band of brothers or sisters that they communicate back and forth on whatever issue it is. But Twitter, it has that kind of capability because it's really quick. Twitter's new channel out there is called Vine. I didn't include on here, but that's a 6-second video. I've got concerns about some of these things that I'm not going to go into a whole lot right now. To some degree, it allows for some appropriate use of these tools. Especially, there's one called I think it's a Snap. I forgot that it's like a 1 second, or you use it to somebody. It's a video. And after a certain period of time that you designate 3 seconds, it disappears. And that's just calling for some pretty rude opportunities to use social media. So I think certainly you need to be responsible in using any of these channels. Twitter, you got to be careful as you're out there. You're going to find some fairly challenging information. If you're young kids, you're going to want to make sure that you're monitoring what they're using. That's just a parent talking to a parent. But when an organization, if you're going to use Twitter, to use it to potentially share content, events, but you need to engage in it as well. That you can use to monitor activity. Hashtags are really the key to using Twitter, because if let's say I go to Fellowship Bible Church in Little Rock, so if we use the hashtags FBCLR and use that, I'd know that we kind of communicate, because it'll have an index on that hashtag, and now I can use the hashtag to kind of coordinate various things. And so we had maybe a men's ministry event. It might be FBCLR-men's ministry. And now everyone can tweet, and we can kind of see what other guys are going through. Really the power of Twitter, as well as the lists. They're a full attribute of Twitter, and they help to start out. I've got almost 10,000 followers on my personal Twitter list. I can't stay up with that stream. That tells you, hey, I got 1 million followers. That's great. There's absolutely no way they're communicating with 1 million people. So lists is a powerful tool, as well as hashtags, to be able to see what it is you want to communicate and who to communicate with. Some other, here's just some valuable information about Twitter. Some things that I've used: Hootsuite, Buffer, Social Oomph, Sprout Social, TweetDeck. They're all that I'm not sure it's gotten a lot better in its native client on the web. But if you like to use these other tools, I can schedule tweets and have them go out at certain times, and they're a really effective way. You can see those there, and try those as you will. There's a list out there that you can look at. That's LinkedIn. It's for those, especially from a job standpoint. But the power of LinkedIn and all in honesty is down there on what I'd say the groups. Joining a group and being in the group is very powerful. So, for instance, there's a group called Web Ministry. These are organizations that have a ministry on the web. Part of that group, and you're sharing content, you're connecting with people you not connect with otherwise. Now, see that I'm going to have a group out there for church worship leaders. And if I went and searched it, I'd probably find it. And so I'd have I'd be able to connect with these people I'm meeting at WFX for the weekend. I might be able to stay communicate with them all year, find out how some of the things that they learned at WFX are being used throughout the year. So I can touch with them. There's something called Answers on LinkedIn. It allows you to be kind of a subject matter expert, where you can then share some of your content, some of the things you're learning as a group. And it all will draw new people, because the more that you connect out there as an individual, and then you're a representative or ambassador, first and foremost, God and of Christ as a Christian, but also of your church, of your organization. And so as you share your expertise out there and you allow other people to come in, it gains visibility for your organization, not just for you. So this is really something of great value as well. Who else is continuing to grow? I said the Google Community is cool. Google Hangouts is cool. It's kind of like Skype, but it allows you to share your screen. I can have a private hangout, or I can have a public hangout. I think Google Plus is probably going to really start to make strides and inroads as a key social media channel over the next year, because it's Google. Because share content, the content out there is now coming up in searches. And so the more that I'm out there using key search terms for my organization, for my church, for my ministry, and I use them in the social channels, I want them using them in Google Plus, because it's going to increase my visibility as people search for me as an organization on Google Plus. And so to do this again, I think when I originally did this, I had Google Plus a 6. I think I might even put it as to a 7 or 8 in terms of its importance at this point. We've probably all heard about Pinterest. It's a great place to find recipes and friends and all the other stuff. But it's very visual, and I think it continues to have a lot of engagement. It's what necessarily think would be the first channel that you look at, but it might be for your women's ministry, for instance, or for your youth, young women's ministry, that kind of stuff. So Pinterest is potential there. It's got some real opportunities. You share pins. It's a real engaged user base. The people in there are sharing all the time, and so you have to look and see. I would go on to each of these channels, and I think this is all of them. Go and find out what other churches in your area are doing, sharing. See how much of a presence they have on these, and you can use the gallery that I talked about. Hit them where they ain't. If you have a lot of your churches and organizations in your community on Pinterest, maybe it's where you establish a presence. You may want to just simply to be competitive, but and I don't mean competitive in terms of taking people, just saying you want your presence out there as well. YouTube, we know the power of YouTube. It made some guy out of Korea, probably a millionaire at this point. He's on, he's on New Year's Rockin' Eve. He's on all the shows doing his Gangnam Style. Now we got the Harlem Shake. I don't know who gets attributed to that, but Google has played a huge role in culture of content. Having a YouTube channel is probably a pretty important part of your strategy, whether it's your sermons, whether it's excerpts of your sermons, whether it's a video that's produced by your people within the church, whether it's video from trips and showing about, because we're a very call-oriented culture. If you're not getting images and video of those things that are really reaching into those in your church and call on those, and it's rightly so. I mean, it's a biblical aspect. Sometimes we can get too caught up in the cause and we forget why we're doing the cause. But YouTube and in general gives you that opportunity. Sharing YouTube on Facebook and sharing YouTube, having a YouTube page on your website is probably a pretty safe and important strategy for you. Things to consider when you talk about content. Podcast is growing. There's a lot of people are talking about podcasting. What do you do? It can be 15 minutes. It could be 45 minutes. It can be once a week. It could be every day. It could be a devotional for 2 minutes. It could be an interview of members in the church about issues that are going on. It could be, there's so many formats. Think about who you have to do it, who's capable of potentially doing it. And that then gets back to the fact of when you are going through any of these channels, I'm not advocating you do all of them, for sure. I'd start to evaluate, and you look at the content that I've just given you for each of these social media channels, and what content you have, and what content is going to work best in those channels. Pick something, pick one to dominate. And when I dominate, I'm just saying we're going to do this really, really well. We're going to put good content out there. We're going to monitor it. We're going to engage people. We're going to give away free stuff. We're going to produce ebooks and put those, whatever it is. Make sure that you figure out at least one that you're going to spend some time on. Your problem. Here's how to find it. Blogs, images, video. We've talked about a lot of these. Skinning your content. Take it out of its old skin, put it in another. Okay, with changing the intent. Put a RSS feed like Google Reader so that what's coming through, and you pull content out that is a certain search word in it. Way to actually do some Google alerts, and if a Google alert, let's say it's your pastor, you can find out every time that somebody on the web mentions pastor, you'll get an alert for that, and you monitor those kinds of things. So being able to know where the content is and how to go about getting it is pretty critical in this day and age. And here's what you can do: giveaways, Bible study materials, guests. Save this for you. But it's really good material for you to be able to hopefully stimulate some thoughts and some ideas. So periodically, you've got to evaluate where you are and what you're doing is working. Okay, so I gauge, I can know the content I can put it out on the right channels. How do you know if it's working? That's where ROI comes in. Now, ROI, call it return on investment, call it return on influence. There's a lot of words going around, but I'm an advocate. My background is a CPA, and so even though I know that you can't always measure what's going on in the kingdom of God, it's important that you understand that you're spending your time wisely. Those things that aren't working. So use some smart goals. Set goals that are specific. If you're going to have Facebook, we're going to have this many likes and this many people talking about us in the next 6 months. It's going to cost to go out and create content and I want new followers. And I want to analyze the people that are following us. And I want 10% of those who are following us to not be on our church roster because I want new people. Make it specific so they measure it. Then actionable. It needs to be something you can do. So you can measure something. If you don't have the right tools to measure it, you don't have the right time, you can't run the right, Facebook. All of these actual tools have reporting mechanisms in it. If you can afford it, you can get those that actually will measure all of them on your, they'll have them for you. You can measure them all on one platform. This can be pricey, and so some organizations don't have that kind of means to do that. But whatever you do, make it measurable, actionable. You can make it relevant and time bound. You stick to those goals for your social media. These are great parameters to use in life, in business, in ministry, but also you use in your social media work. It's obvious. Do more things that are working, do less of things that aren't, and then take the next step forward. So I found this to be of benefit. If you have any questions related to social media in general, you can find me on Facebook at Jeff Abram or at /media. My Google Plus, like I said down there, if you can find any other social network where I'm not, tell me about it because I'll probably join up because my job is to stay current on what's going on out there. I'll be your eyes and ears and help you be successful at using social media because your message is too important to not be heard. To let you know that it's been a great opportunity for me to be able to share this time with you. And again, I'm always reachable online, and there's my cell number if you want to call for any questions. But I want to thank you for being part of this and for WFX for hosting this event. And I hope you enjoyed it. And now go out there and make great content and engage your people wisely using social media.